بعض الأشخاص متأخرين، فنريد ننطي فرصة أكثر، راح نتأخر بس 7 دقائق، بعد دقيقتين إن شاء الله بالجزء.
I welcome you to today's lecture, and I welcome Dr.St. John Simpson, who is one of the biggest archaeologists and researchers. I believe this lecture will be distinguished and enriching. And also, I welcome my friend, media personality, Dr. Haydar Asafi, although he is a part of our team. Thank you for you all, and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to this event. We would like to also thank especially our guest, honorable guest, Dr. St. John Simpson, for coming to give this lecture about one of the eras which kind of not very highlighted in our country, which is one of the civilizations which appeared in our land. And he is going to use his knowledge and experience in order to elaborate how important that kind of era in our history, and also one of the things which he is now at the moment, like they are doing and researching and digging, is Koubeybeh, which is the near Nasiriyah, and these kind of, he will highlight the importance of Koubeybeh and also the kind of era which is up to the beginning of Islam, just prior to the Islam era. So he will highlight that period of time. I would leave this to Dr. Simpson to take.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here at the Iraqi Cultural Centre in the heart of London. We work very closely with the Embassy of the Republic of Iraq here in London, and it's, as I say, an honor to be able to repay some of the debt that we owe you, and to the debt we owe the whole of Iraq. And what I'm going to do is talk about a project that I have been directing in Iraq for several years now, to give you some highlights and some insights into periods of your history that are less well known than some of the others. So we should begin by reminding ourselves that culture is precious and fragile. But understanding culture helps us understand history. And our mission at Koubeba has been to support, through training, education, and public information, our sort of archaeological goals. And I just illustrate there some of my colleagues in recent years from Iraq, from different towns in Dhikar, who we've been actively training as part of our archaeological work, men and women. So the question many people have is, why the British Museum? Why is the museum working in Iraq through archaeology? And that's because our mission is to research, preserve, and understand cultures and to collaborate. And for us, archaeology is one of the most important ways of showing and doing that. So we've been working in Iraq for a short time, almost 180 years, in fact, excavating, teaching, and researching. So we have strong collections, as you know, here in London in the British Museum. But by working in Iraq, we can bring the results of new research from that work back into the interpretation of our collections that help us explain to the world's public what the impact and importance of Iraqi Mesopotamian heritage is using our collections. So the next question, after why the British Museum, is why Koubeba? And the answer to that is that most archaeologists working in Iraq are interested in the early periods of Sumer and Babylonia, or in Assyria. So people are interested in the origins of civilization, the birth of writing, the first cities, the great empires, the things that make Iraq great. But we know very little about everyday life, everyday people, small places, even the towns of ancient Iraq. And we know even less about periods like the Sasanian period, the period before the coming of Islam, or even the early Islamic period outside places like Baghdad, Samarra, Kufa, Basra. So it's for these reasons I chose many years ago to pick a site that would answer some of these research questions about these other periods and types of site. So this is the location. Koubeba is in Dhikar province, very close to the town of Rafai, just north of Nasiriyah. It's a site that was first placed on a map in 1973, and there's a detail of the Russian map produced then, with Rafai at the top left, then a very small town, and the site of Koubeba circled in red. It was first recorded as an archaeological site on the Archaeological Atlas produced by the Directorate General of Antiquities in 1975. The site was looted in around 2003, but no work was done there until our expedition arrived in 2021. So we began, like all archaeologists do, with drones, making a topographic survey, and trying to understand the periods of occupation at this site and the size of the site. So here you can see a view of it with my team of European and Iraqi archaeologists, making a systematic collection of pottery and flint and stone and other artifacts across the surface of the site. And from this systematic approach, we can see what are the latest periods of occupation, when it was abandoned. And some occasional finds give us ideas of earlier periods lying deeper below the surface. So after a few days of making a survey, we then laid out a grid with topographic instruments and the drone, and started to make some trenches in the different parts of the site to try and understand what are the periods of occupation. When was it founded? How long did it last? Was the occupation continuous? What evidence can the excavations give us about the food, the housing, the pottery, and so on? So the red squares are the small excavations we made at each end of the site and to the south. And the blue area is the area that we then opened up for bigger excavation. So to give you an idea of scale, this mound is about 4 meters high above the plain, so it's quite a small site in Mesopotamian terms, and it's about 450 meters long. So it's much smaller than Ur or Gersu or these big city sites, but it probably belongs to what you might think of as a small town in ancient times. Now, keeping these red squares in mind, we can now look at the remains of these excavations. So we make very small, careful, stratigraphic soundings, excavating layer by layer with the local workmen that we hire from the villages, sieving the material so that we can recover all of the smallest pieces of pottery and animal bone and glass and so on. And the idea of these soundings is to go as deep as possible so that we can see the different layers of occupation. The first result is that we can now understand that this site began to be occupied 5,000 years ago. At a period that we know archaeologically as the Jamdat Nasr period, a period of early urbanization, the beginnings of writing, but before cuneiform or mismari. So at this date, at the very beginning of writing, these people are making drawings on pottery, like this fragment of jar here, or on clay tablets, a little bit like the drawings that they were doing in Egypt that we know as hieroglyphs. So this is their first idea. You have an idea, you're trying to articulate the idea as a word, and so you make a drawing. If you want to write sheep, you draw a picture of a sheep. If you want to get across the idea of ploughing in the field, then you draw a picture of a plough. And so this piece of pottery, it's a fragment of a large storage jar, unfortunately broken, still has the remains of 3 incised signs. And you can see one of them on the left, and it's the sign of the plough. And so the rest of the inscription is missing, but we can probably guess that this is a jar inscribed to show that it's for containing the product of fields. You know, it's for containing barley or wheat or some food stuff like that. So this is important because we actually only have pictographic inscriptions like this from a very small number of sites, like Uruk and Kish and Jamdat Nasr, very small number. And they're all big urban sites. So normally people then say, well, people only read or wrote or understood writing in the cities. But here we have a town, and they are already writing. And so even though it is just one small piece of pottery like this, it opens up the question. At the beginning of writing, perhaps more people were writing, because it's a very simple script, than we've given credit for. So we have another single find that opens our eyes to another big question. On the left, there is a fragment of polished stone vase. And this type of stone, we know, comes from eastern Iran. This stone cannot be found in Iraq. And on the right of the screen, you can see complete examples from old excavations done at Ur. Again, people have assumed, because they are found at Ur, only these imported stone vessels were only used in the big city sites by kings, in temples, in rich society. But here we have an example, broken, of such an imported vessel at a medium-sized site. And so what that shows is that Koubeybeh, at the beginning of, in this case, the 3rd millennium BC, is trading through the waterways with the merchants, probably of Bahrain, and the merchants of what is now the UAE and eastern Iran. So Koubeybeh is now, of course, you've seen on the map, north of Nasiriyah, but it's plugged into maritime trade, Persian Gulf trade, from the very beginning of the site. Now, the excavations we did of this very early period, 5,000 years ago, also showed that they are making pottery themselves at the site. And as you can see from the pottery on this picture, it's not exactly beautiful, it's practical. It's everyday pots for drinking from or storing food. Now, we know it's locally made because we found a kiln, and some of this pottery, in fact, was never even put into the kiln because it broke in the workshop. So it was then broken pieces of clay pots and was thrown away. And this is very, very unusual archaeologically to find this sort of thrown away discards of a potter's workshop. And the perfect proof that one can look for in showing that this pottery is made for local use. So it's importing luxury materials like stone vessels, people are writing things down, and they're making things as well for local use. After maybe 100 or 200 years, based on the excavations we made, we can now say that Koubeybeh was abandoned, maybe for 500 years or more, and then was reoccupied briefly, and then abandoned again. And this you see the excavation on the left where we've gone down 4 meters below the ground, the top of the mound, down to almost the bottom of the virgin soil. And this, what we call sequence of layers, goes back to about the 1st century after Christ. So we have 2,000 years of occupation within this sequence. So the pottery is much finer, and on the top right you see some remains of painted, polished pottery, drinking cups and beakers. These also come from southeastern Iran. These are also imports via Persian Gulf trade. And at the bottom you have a type of pottery that doesn't look very special perhaps, but the style of this pottery where they put cup after cup or bowl after bowl, one inside the other, in the kiln, And when they fire it, the variation in the amount of oxygen that the different parts receive give a deliberate two-tone effect. So parts are cream, parts are red, depending on the amount of oxygen that the clay receives. Now, this is a very clever technique. And this technique begins in the Greek period, in the Hellenistic period, and we find it identical types of pottery across Iraq, into the Persian Gulf, into Iran, and deep into Central Asia. So it's locally made pottery, but it's reflecting a type of technology and an aesthetic that is almost international and global in the Hellenistic and Parthian periods. Now, this type of pottery and this imported Iranian pottery have never been recognized before in Iraq. So small evidence from a small site, but transforms our understanding of how connected Koubeïba was in the Parthian period. And at the top is a head of a figurine, it has a moustache, although it's not so clear on the photo. And this is a Parthian figurine, probably the 1st or 2nd century AD. So for the next next periods through the site, we see that Koubeïba is almost continually occupied through the Parthian and Sasanian periods, up until the 6th or 7th century AD. And at this period of the 6th or 7th century AD, just before Islam, the whole of the center of the site is covered in big buildings. So you can see after rain here, the red lines outline some of the walls that appeared as the ground starts to dry out after heavy rain. So the areas of the walls are drier than the areas of the room fills around. And so you see the wall lines appearing after rain. So rain is great for archaeology, I have to say. And of course for the agriculture, even if it's terrible if you're trying to drive around Iraq at that period. So in the 6th or 7th century, Koubeïba is covered in big buildings. And in my experience, these walls are so high and so thick, and carefully built that some of the houses probably are 2-story and are almost monumental. And this is supported by the fact that at this period on the survey, we find traces of decorated stucco, so gypsum decoration attached to the walls of some of the rooms to decorate them. And this is something you expect with large buildings or middle-class buildings of the wealthy. Now, we don't have any inscriptions, unfortunately, from this period either, but we can tell for sure that some of them are Christian. Because inscribed after firing on the pottery water pitcher that you see on the right is a cross. So the state religion at this period is Zoroastrianism, but we know there were many other faiths, Christians, Jews, even some Buddhists, and many other Gnostic sects. So this was a period of tolerance with many different faiths. And we have this tangible evidence that some of them, at least, were Christian. Now, for this period, as you can see, we're just below the surface of the site. We excavated some rooms of different houses, some streets, and a courtyard of one of these houses. So this is the courtyard looking from one end to the other. It's rectangular, as you can see, 2-meter scales, an oven, some traces of broken pottery on the floor. And then just beyond where the red arrows are is the excavation we made in the street or alley that runs between this house and the next house. Now, those two arrows are pointing at something rather specific. So just inside the doorway from the courtyard to the street, we found two magic bowls. And this is one of them. So this is a tradition that was very common in Iraq, especially southern Iraq, in the late Sasanian period, in the 6th, 7th centuries, where people who were worried about their wife or their husband becoming sick, or if they were worried about losing their child, or worried about their livestock dying or being captured, they would write magical spells. They would get a magician, hire a magician, who would write magical spells in a language on a bowl, and it would be saying things like, go away demon, and keep this person healthy, protect my household, etc. So this bowl was written in Jewish Aramaic, probably by a professional scribe, because it's very well written, and it was commissioned by the wife for her husband, who suffered from migraine. And it was to drive away the migraine. And it was then buried upside down inside the door, because they thought that the demons who brought the migraine probably went through the door just like people did. So they anthropomorphized the demons. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of these bowls known from old excavations and from looting, but there are very few that have been found in good archaeological conditions. And this is one of the first, and the only one from Dhikar. So it's interesting, it's important locally and archaeologically. And although part of it is missing, the specialists that I work with who read these bowls tell me that they can reconstruct almost the entire bowl because the text parallels other bowls known from looting. And there is a big question, where are these looted bowls from? Are they from Iraq? Which part of Iraq are they from? There are different views by different lawyers, and so on and so forth. What we can now say is that this excavation helps tie the looted bowls to this part of Iraq. And so legally, for the future, this is quite an important step, as you can probably appreciate. But we didn't just find one, we found another one. So this is my colleague from Italy, who has defended her PhD on magic bowls. She can read these things. And she was very excited because the bowl was buried 1 meter from the second bowl, next to the doorway again, covered by a pottery lid to protect it, so you can see the lid above the bowl, and then Eleonora excavating the bowl. And was very nervous because she wasn't sure what would happen when she turned the bowl upside down. You know, what would it say? Would it be in Jewish Aramaic? Or would it be in Mandaic, or in a language she couldn't read? So we didn't know. And then she turned it upside down, and then she was very disappointed. And then we got even more excited, because it's a completely new type of bowl. And you're probably looking at this picture and wondering, where's the inscription? It's because the inscription was written on a piece of leather or parchment, rolled up like a napkin, and then held in place with a napkin ring of bitumen. And so what we have here is the ring of bitumen that held as a support that scroll which has disintegrated. And so this is the first time this practice, which is described in Syriac texts, and which we can think of because we have lead rolls from sites, we can now put these bits of evidence together and show that there is another type of magic practice going on, And in this house, both types are used at the same time by the same person. So it gives us another little indication of complexity of belief and practice in a household. Then something happened. The site is abandoned, we think, for a very short period of time. And then the houses are all cut down, the walls are cut and destroyed. And new forms of houses are built across the middle of the site. But the occupation shrinks. So instead of big buildings with big thick walls, we have small rooms with thin walls, which are one story, of a completely different plan. And the pottery and the glass that we find inside these houses allow us to date it to about the 8th century, maybe the late 7th, and definitely the early 8th century. And so this new occupation dates to the beginning of the Islamic period, before the Abbasids, to the period of the Umayyads. So to understand this change of function of the site, we excavated a much bigger area, as you can see, 2,500 square meters, to understand what these houses look like. And so we are working very responsibly during COVID here. So we're working socially distanced workmen across a large area. And what we find are rows of houses with bread ovens, storage jars, cooking facilities, just below the surface, with objects on floors indicating that the houses were abandoned suddenly. So we find a hoard of coins on one floor, metalwork lying abandoned, seals, knives, as if everyone just locked the door and ran away. So this is a view from drone showing the houses from that first season and the plan of some of these houses. But there was a surprise sitting right in the middle of the open plaza next to the houses. And this is the surprise. So it's a single room structure made of mud brick, like all of the other buildings. One room, one door, very clean floor, nothing on the floor at all, with a square construction in the middle of one room. And so we have a mihrab of a mosque. And it's one of the earliest small mosques to be excavated anywhere in the Islamic world of the early 8th century. We're at the beginning of Islamization here in southern Iraq, at a period when other sites like Hira and all along the Iraqi desert margins, we have evidence for Christianity, monastery after monastery, church after church, all the way down the Gulf, from Failaka to Qarq Island, UAE. There are churches and monasteries being built at this date. But here, we've got a change, and we don't have Christianity. We've got Islam appearing. And I'm not very good at maths, I'll admit. So I spent some time at night that first evening wondering how many people could pray in this mosque, because I knew I'd be asked the next day. And then when we arrived, I talked to my inspectors, and I talked to the police, archaeological police, and to the workmen. And I said, this mosque has been abandoned since the 8th century. Now's your chance. And it's very emotional. So we photographed it, we filmed it with a drone, as they prayed in this mosque for the first time. And I immediately knew this mosque holds 20 worshippers. So it's a local mosque for a local community. And probably all of the houses that we've excavated around are enough. I mean, this mosque serves them. So it's not like the big mosques of Wasit and Kufa and Samara, which are congregational mosques, big mosques for large urban populations. This is a local mosque for a local community. But beyond this site, after heavy rain, as you all know, we had terrible rain in March this year. I mean, it was great for the farmers, but terrible for everyone else. And 4 days of rain and hail and even snow on the Euphrates. When we returned to the site, this was the view. Koubeibeh had become like an island, surrounded by the remains of the water. And this explained something that we had thought 3 years ago. Because 3 years ago, working with Dr. Jafar Jothari from the University of Qadisiyah, who's a geoarchaeologist, a specialist in understanding the geology around sites, we started to excavate pits and holes in the fields around the site to understand what the fields looked like in ancient times. And with special permission from the State Board of Antiquities and Heritage in Baghdad, we were allowed to bring what the farmers would love to bring every day, but are not allowed to. We could bring a backhoe. And so we'd already made a small test pit, careful test pit, and we knew that at 1.80 meters below present ground surface, below the agricultural soils, there was a layer that looked like a marsh, a wetland, green clay. So we decided we need a bigger area. We brought this in. Very good driver. Very, very good driver. So we tell him to excavate to 1.70 meters and stop. So he excavates very quickly, 1.70 meters. So this is away from the site. We're not damaging the archaeology. We're just going through agricultural soil. And you see this black layer, this dark green black layer. This is marsh. So we're recording it in section and in plan. This is with my female inspectors. And in the top of this layer of clay was pottery. And the pottery is exactly the same as the pottery from the latest period of occupation at Koubeibeh. So what we can see is that, and then below it is agricultural soil. So we have environmental change around Koubeibeh. So at first, it's a village surrounded by fields. And the animal bone we've got sheep and goat and cattle and even gazelle. But in the 8th century, something changes and it floods. And Koubeibeh becomes an island. And so what we are seeing here for the first time archaeologically is proof or evidence of what is described by some of the early Islamic historians when they say that at the end of the Sasanian period, the kings were neglecting the people, they were fighting the Byzantines, the agricultural systems collapsed, there was flooding and neglect, probably chaos during the beginning of the Islamic conquest, people fleeing, people going back to Iran. We know this from historical sources. And what I think we have here is that the old population goes. It becomes an island surrounded by this marsh and water, and new people come. Muslims come, perhaps from the Basra area, and they refound this site and start perhaps rely on fishing rather than herding and agriculture. So, as you can see, it's a small site, previously unknown, of a type that no one has really considered important before. But by doing careful work over 3 years now, we have thrown completely different light on many of the periods from 5,000 years ago to the beginning of Islam, with some completely unexpected results. But as I said at the beginning, archaeological projects are more than just research. They're more than just excavation. And what we are trying to do here is to educate everyone into the importance of cultural heritage, why sites matter, why history matters. And as you can see here, we're opening up to inspections from the commander of the archaeological police of Nasiriyah, the governor of Dhaka province, the president of Kufa University, students, and thanks to the support, great support of His Excellency Mohammed Jafar al-Sadr, we were able to go behind the scenes in the shrines in Karbala and Kufa as guests of the shrines, of the holy shrines, and present publications that we've produced in Arabic for the libraries, for the schools, and so on. And so I will just show these because to me and to my colleagues in the museum, this is something that we can do more of very effectively, and that's produce books like this in Arabic for students, for anyone interested. So this is the first book in Arabic on the subject of Sasanian glass, which perhaps none of you will go immediately out to buy because it's rather specialist, but it's an illustration of what we can do. And by talking to our colleagues in Iraq and with you, we can find out what you want, what you need, what the students need, and we can start producing more books like this. And then thanks to conversations I had with Iraqi colleagues who said, well, books are good, but not everyone wants a book. What you need to do are leaflets. And so we produced a leaflet on Koubayba in Arabic that we could take to schools, give to the workmen, give to anyone that we met. And the faces say it all, because these are the faces of the sheikhs around Koubayba. They didn't know why they were coming. And I think they all thought it was something to do with problems or possibly the possibilities of hiring more workmen from their families and villages. It was one or the other. What they were not expecting were to get these leaflets. And I think this is the way that we can bring cultural heritage back into the families, into the homes, and have a wider impact. And that's our moral duty to do. So I will close with this set of thanks to the embassy here in London, to State Board of Antiquities and Heritage in Baghdad that have been supporting us, gave us the permits and the permissions to work, and the University of Qadisiyah in Diwaniyah with whom we work, and our European academic colleagues, and the people in the pictures who, as you can see, outnumber the foreigners considerably. That's our local specialists, archaeologists, police, and workmen. And on that note, I will finish, and thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you.
And we would like to thank you for, in the name of the Iraqi Culture Center in London, and the director, Dr. as well as our Iraqi community, to thank you for your great work in Iraq and help everyone else to understand that period of time, which was hidden from our history.
Thank you.
I will start with a couple of questions from my side, and then we will hand over question to the community to ask any question you would like. And
Great.
we hope that you are fine with that.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
I will ask you for a general question, which I think you heard a lot in any lecture. What kind of collaboration between the British Museum and the Iraqi Museum in general?
So, museums are a family, I would say. And national museums, or even bigger national museums like the BM, are part of a particularly special family. And anyone who works in museums knows this, that we share information through training, but we know the difficult times. We have had our experiences in the Second World War, when we had to move everything from London into deep storage or to different parts of England as a secret project at the beginning of the war. And so we understand the pain that other museums go through, Iraq Museum in 2003, museums in Ukraine today. And so we share that experience, and we can talk about things, about how we can help each other in the difficult times, how we can share good experiences for the future. And so we have very close intellectual relations with them through training. And also in the identification, as many of you know, through the identification and repatriation through your embassy here in London of pieces that we hear have been stolen, that are sitting in London or at Heathrow or at other places, that we can identify on the behalf of the Iraq Museum and return through your embassy here in London. So there are multiple layers that we work together on.
I will not let this question escape without. When are we going to see a collaboration between the Iraqi Museum as well as the British Museum to the degree where you rotate the Iraqi pieces into Iraq or bring the Iraqi pieces to London as a borrowing?
We would love to have loans. We loan out of the museum all across the world, and we would love to borrow from Baghdad for an exhibition in London. So it's a two-way street. Loan exhibitions are one of the most effective ways, I think, of showing genuine sharing of culture and trust. So we wait and see.
Any prospect of time?
I'm not the director, am I?
You should ask Oswald.
No. I mean, we're always open. We're always discussing loans and exhibitions. I have a colleague who's hoping to do an exhibition on the Sumerians in a few years' time, and I'm sure he's hoping to borrow from Baghdad. And we always then explore the possibility of a return good faith loan in return. So we've done that before, and we would welcome that opportunity.
Okay. It's two-way, like we said. I'll leave this. I'll leave the rest to you guys, so you can ask any question you like, lady.
Yes.
This question is relevant to the gentleman's question, really. So when we visit the British Museum as an Iraqi, and I look at the Iraqi department, I think it's the best. It's not being biased. It's gorgeous. It's very well maintained. And my question is there any, are there any plans to return them to Iraq because they belong to us?
Well, we have always maintained the highest degree of due diligence. And so we have always, since the 19th century, followed and helped write the antiquities laws of countries. And so the objects that we have from Iraq that are part of our collection were in respect of these laws. And the most clear example of that is the work that was done for 10 years at Ur. So these were excavations that were jointly sponsored by the British Museum and the University of Philadelphia in America, and were undertaken with under the first antiquities law of Iraq. And the objects then divided according to the law, so that 50% would remain in Baghdad, and 25% would go to London, and 25% to Penn. And after a few years, after Gertrude Bell died, there were problems in Baghdad with the antiquities law. And it was decided by our director then that we would help the administration in Baghdad by sending a curator from our museum to make the law tougher. And so we sent a curator from my department, from my museum, to Baghdad to rewrite the law. This is a very little known fact. And he made it stronger. And it was an extraordinary thing, because we're sending a British Museum curator there to strengthen the law of Iraq, because we're helping build a new nation state. And of course, he had to be even fairer, because he had to tell the British Museum, no, you can't take this piece or that piece, even though we have an agreement and a law, because I'm not going to favour my own museum. So it's an illustration of how we've been very respectful of the laws and in upkeeping them.
Which laws? We were under colonialism. I doubt there was any much choice we had at the time.
No, the law was authorized and signed off by the government of Baghdad. And then the law continued to be changed and strengthened and strengthened and strengthened, as all laws are, you know. So
I think most Iraqis are hoping that the same kind of a Greek situation will be repeated with Iraqis art pieces, or the whole world is looking for that. But anyway,
I would refer to a minister of culture of another nearby Arab state, who once remarked in my presence, not knowing that I was from the museum, that he wished that his country had a showcase in the British Museum so that it could act as a window on the history of their country. And that is something that we view our galleries as doing, that we place all of the countries and cultures that we have in our collection next to each other so that they are in a cultural dialogue. And that, if you like, we are cultural ambassadors in London for the cultures of all of the countries of the world. And that you can see then things, and you can see for yourself, as you said yourself, Mesopotamian heritage is the best in the museum. That's what we want to tell the Greeks, the French, the Americans. Come to the British Museum, and before you go to Iraq, come to the museum and see Mesopotamian heritage here first. So that's my answer.
let's start with that.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. A very interesting thing. I will ask, my question is...
if you hold it to
you are the British. You know about our history and about all our archaeology far more better than any other foreign country. And in 2003, we've seen on television how is the Iraqi museum has been, disappeared,
terrible,
looted,
yeah.
and went all over the world. Do you think that the British can help and follow these, because I'm sure you guys, everything, where these important items are. Can the British help as a government?
Sorry, you could introduce yourself.
My name is Fawzi Lazim. I'm a doctor.
Yeah. Thank you. I would answer that in two parts. Firstly, there are many stories told and untold of bravery and heroism within Iraq for saving pieces, hiding pieces, and bringing pieces back. And I think it is safe to say that your 22 galleries in the Iraq Museum, some of them are of international quality now. They have been rebuilt, are being rebuilt. There are new galleries opening. The quality of lighting, shall we say, of your Assyrian sculpture is better than in the British Museum. So I think you have many things to be proud of in your museum. And some of the highlights will, we understand from recent press in Baghdad, go back on display after remaining hidden for their own safety for some years. So that is one thing. And the second thing is that we work, like many countries, very, very carefully and closely with law enforcement at the borders. And so we in the British Museum work particularly closely with UK Border Force, and over many years now, decades in fact, have been identifying and seizing objects and returning them to countries of origin, including Iraq. Thousands of cuneiform tablets, seals, and other objects. And we will continue to do so. I could get a phone call or an email tonight when I get home, or tomorrow. The borders are always being watched 24/7. And if there is something that is illegally trafficked coming from Iraq, you can be sure it will go back to Iraq. And that is something that we maintain a very strong position on, and we will continue to do so.
If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you. Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar. I am a local councillor in Kensington and Chelsea.
Yeah.
Very interested in archaeology and history. And what you have presented was fantastic. I have enjoyed every moment of it. We've had a little conversation earlier about training.
Yes.
We know, we have tens of universities in Iraq now, and few of them are delivering archaeology, offering archaeology degrees. But the problem we have, as you mentioned, is under the current laws, students are not allowed to do field training. And without any training, we cannot have an army of Iraqi archaeologists. Since you've identified the problem, what could we take from here? We have, all of us, we are aware of this. So how could we try to fix this problem? Talking to the officials, to Mr. Ambassador or the Iraqi government to allow students to have at least a year of field training.
No, thank you. It's a very good question. I think this is very, very important in terms of building capacity faster. The current system is that the students in the universities of Baghdad, Kufa, Qadisiyah, and so on are studying archaeology, many women and men, but as you say, can't do that. They can't turn the theory into practice because they're not allowed, as inexperienced students, to be allowed to risk damaging the rich cultural heritage of Iraq. So that's the reason for the law. So we understand that position. But if they want to then go and become archaeological inspectors with the State Board, it means that when they start, they have no practical experience. So the State Board, quite rightly, asks all of us as foreign teams to take as many of these inspectors, experienced and inexperienced, to train them, which we gladly do. And I showed pictures at the beginning of us doing that. But it does seem to me that what we can start to do through conversations is to start to produce publications in Arabic for those students who, many of whom do not speak English, and to start effectively sort of mentoring through the publication scheme, lectures, giving lectures in Baghdad and in the local universities as I have and my colleague Paul Collins has. And seeing whether there are future ways, joint projects, maybe joint between a foreign institution like the British Museum or a foreign university, a local university, and if the State Board allows it, then those students to sort of be doing not maybe excavation, but survey, things that will not damage the cultural heritage, but where they can get their hands on. What they want to do is they want to be able to pick up a pot and touch it. You know, archaeologists need to feel the clay, as it were. And that is a non-threatening, non-invasive way of making that step forward. And that's something that I think will come with time and requires lots of conversations in Baghdad with the director and with universities. And to see, my head of department, Paul Collins, and I were in Baghdad for a short time before Christmas, just to explore this idea. We went to universities, we talked to museum directors, we talked to Sabah and the Minister of Culture about this. What do you need? What can we deliver within our means that helps you? And this is where these ideas came from. And we will carry on doing that. And sorry. Sorry. Oh gosh, lots. Yeah, sorry.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Simpson, for this really wonderful talk, and I enjoyed.
Yes.
I enjoyed every word of it. I got 3 small questions.
Gosh, okay.
One is about Kooiba.
Yes.
As you, in your lecture, say, it survived nearly from 5,000 years from the pictographic writing before the uniform up to the 8th century AD. Important for such a place to survive all these centuries. As far as I know, some of the Sumerian town, much bigger than this, have been abandoned centuries before. And we know from Ashurbanipal library, he done some excavation and he brought some of these artifacts and put it in the library. So many cities were abandoned, while this survived to the 8th century. So what makes, I don't know there is any big economy there in that part of the world.
I think you only need to look at Iraq now, and the answer is the water. Life is where the water is, and the water moves. You have such a low gradient between Basra and Baghdad that once you lose control of the canal, or you lose control of the agriculture, then the canals can break the banks and the water will move by gravity and find a new course. If you have weak management, then you have weak canal structures. You can over-irrigate and then salinate the fields. And to me, this is perhaps one of the most interesting things about Kooiba, is that we have occupation abandonment, occupation abandonment, occupation abandonment. And this is a pattern that I think is very typical of non-urban communities. They're following the fields and the water. This site becomes a little bit too, the fields are too salty, or the water is changed. So they'll chase the water. They'll go 5 kilometers, and they'll put a new village. They'll give it the same name. And then the water moves again, and the animals eat all the stubble and so on, and then they move a second time, and a third time. And so they keep bouncing around the landscape within a local area because they don't have the resources to keep the water where it is. Whereas cities have built their palaces, they've founded their temples. They're not going to lose the temples because it would be unlucky. And they've got sufficient workforce there to keep the canals flowing. So the cities remain stuck in the landscape for long periods of time, continuous occupation, until military conquest or catastrophic canal failure. And so we see in the landscape of around the Rafai, about 5 kilometers west of Rafai, it's a Sumerian landscape. City sites, the water moved. They're all abandoned. And the area east of Rafai is a landscape of Sasanian early Islamic sites. But they're all small. And I think it's all about the water.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask you just like, because there are so
just
many
ask you
people.
one thing.
If
One
I
thing
ask
and
you
will
kindly,
one thing
just to be
about
short.
the people who built Kobaiba,
Yeah.
and the same the Sumerian. If we read in the books, nobody tell us what's their origin. Were they indigenous people, local people, or they came somewhere else? Because some people say they're from Indian subcontinent.
I think a lot of people moving in, some people stay there, intermarry, and yeah, I mean the basic core of of Iraq is Sumerian. You know, the Sumerian blood and the genes continued into later periods up until the current day. A proportion of you will have Sumerian blood and genes in you. Some of you won't. So it's about continuity and change in the landscape. Sorry, I should. Sorry.
If I may ask you to introduce yourself also kindly, I'd just like to be the question to be short.
Yeah, sorry, my answers are long.
One question only.
I hope so.
That's all right. Not it's for everyone. That's
Na'man Muna, and I'm not an archaeologist, but I'm interested in archaeology. I'm a member of BC, I'm a member of Nahrain Network. I really participate quite a lot. And I visit sites and museums when I go to Iraq, and I regularly visit Iraq. Last time was last month when I visited Baghdad Museum, Najaf Museum, Babylon. Honest with you, I was so disturbed and so disappointed. Cultural heritage. How do we raise the culture of heritage in Iraq? To start with, the government doesn't support any of these activities. I'm glad to see that you are printing leaflets, but the Iraqi Museum doesn't have any leaflets. The leaflet for Stanceria School, university, as they call it, it was printed in 1957.
Yes, yes.
You know, that is a type of interest in heritage. The museums close at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Are free to go and see the museum. So there is no cultural heritage being promoted in Iraq. And the question is, how do we actually improve that situation in Iraq? Thank you very much.
I would say that the answer is always in the media. Culture is, if you get culture embedded into media, then even if the museum is closed at 2 and you can't get there, at least share through the media the stories, the discoveries, the history, and get them here tonight, I suppose. And with an interest and education and increasing hunger and appetite, the tide becomes too strong and change will come. You know, the British Museum in the 19th century was not open every day. It would have different galleries open on different days, depending on which part of the museum it was. Now we're open every day. So this is about the evolution and response of museums to the hunger and appetite and demand. And I think one just has to keep pushing and be patient.
If I may add also to this point, because I've dealt with many teams. We did like few documentaries about archaeological sites. Now we are very proud, to be honest, to say that there are so many teams all over Iraq, and the Archaeology and Antiquities Directorate with the Ministry of Culture are helping and opening the gates for these teams. So it is building up, and we are seeing a lot of progress. And exactly, it is the government. It's just like, I hope you are talking about the Iraqi government. You're not talking about British government. So yeah, that's what I meant. Like there are kind of few steps are being taken, and they were significant, to be honest. Difference. Even for someone who works in media and do a documentary about archaeological sites. So I just wanted to, we all hope so. Sorry.
No, thank you very much. My name is Ali Kuba. I'm not an archaeologist and not a social scientist.
Not yet.
So I don't have much information. I've got a small question and just a comment. The question is, as you know, there is quite a lot of interest in looking at bag time, you know, and there is now even talk about have people imagined the round city?
Mm-hmm.
There was an exhibition at the Institut de la Mode Arabe in Paris last year called Baghdad, which essentially used artificial intelligence to imagine the city. Do you think the sort of work you've done in Koubayba can actually be applied to, I mean, you know, you're looking sort of fairly softly on the ground to see whether someone can uncover the old round city of Baghdad?
Yeah, I mean, it's a subject that we confronted in London after the Second World War because we had to rebuild London. And that was the beginning of urban archaeology in Britain. And it's something that has not really happened much in the Middle East. But I think that is one of the great possibilities for the future, to understand Baghdad, Cairo. Recently, of course, Sabah has been excavating in Basra. And to understand the modern capitals and the big cities, then one needs to do urban archaeology. Much of it will have been destroyed, of course, by modern building, but there's a chance that pockets and patches will survive, and that's for the future. And I think it's got huge potential, actually.
Well, that gives people hope. I just have one comment, because this is the Iraqi Cultural Center. Just breaking news. You know that the Cannes Film Festival is held in Cannes this week. Just to let you know that an Iraqi film called The President's Cake has just won the Audience Award and the
Fantastic.
Director's Circle Award. And there is really great excitement about this film. I mean, people are wanting to buy it because it's so interesting. And the link to you is that it actually starts somewhere in the car. It actually, the story, forget about the story, but the story takes the heroine from that bar and moves her to Baghdad in the morning. And I think the Iraqi Cultural Center should look for that and get it.
We will invite the director to talk about the there.
Brilliant.
And also Saeed Effendi has actually been the film of 1953. We now have a new, improved version of it, again by the Cannes Classique, and that should come to London.
Great. Thank you.
Well,
this- I think this lady here-
بس العفو الست قبلك. Sorry, it's just like the madams before you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry.
Dr. Khulud Mutar, psychiatrist from Borough Hospital. Actually, I have a very simple question, maybe it's related. When I visited the British Museum, I was fascinated to see the Iraqi harp made from silver, قيثارة العراقية المصنوعة من فضة. When I visited the Louvre Museum in Paris, and that was years ago, I was really happy to see the first Iraqi stamp, الطمغة العراقية, which was invented by Sumerian and found in a city called Lagash. It was displayed in a very nice hall, surrounded by 4 lamaso. And in another hall, I found Masallat Hammurabi. Now I'll go to my question. From your point of view, is it much better to see our treasures scattered around the world so that many people can see it, or we should allocate it in one museum in Iraq? Because there is a famous lawyer called Amal Alamuddin, I'm sure you know her, the wife of the famous George Clooney. She succeeded to return statues from Greece, which was from marble, and the Greek government tried long time ago to return it from the British Museum, and this lawyer, Amal Alamuddin, succeeded to return it back to them. Does that would imply on our treasure or no? Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can have a go if you
Okay.
I
This is not, to be honest, like
not
I'll
correct.
be very clear, kind of sharp about it. It's not our subject, because I don't want the subject to be all about and it is not the place, like, and the position of Dr. Simpson is not in this area, like a kind of, because it's more political, more administration, rather than archaeology. And I think it's just like long work. It depends on the people. So if we could move on, I appreciate the question. I'm just like, but it was, I feel it was answered. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah.
Is working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, good evening, and thank you very much, and Dr. Simpson. And of course, big thanks for the Iraqi Culture Center.
Introduce yourself.
I will. My name is Ziad Shiltag. I'm the chairman for the Mandaiyan.
Sorry, guys. If you, yeah, sorry.
For the Mandaiyan Association United Kingdom. So, from what you've done, that's great, and we try to helping more. I found Jewish Mandaic, I found Mandaic, and I found, for example, New Mandaic, Aramaic. I'm talking about Eastern Aramaic. I'm talking about the old Aramaic, where is the Mandaic talking alphabetic and there. And we know there's quite similarity with the languages. So when the new generation trying to help to separate those languages will be mixed. And we found, for example, we know some information we got. There's about a couple thousand items when arrived, and there is a Mandaiyan language with them. And we offer the help. We offering help from this evening to the museum. We have who is interpreting the Mandaic language to the English or to the Arabic, just to make sure we are in the right direction, not disappearing. From where
Very
our
important.
culture, we talking Nasriya, we talking Litlata city, where is the Mandaic piece, where is the water going in there, that's meaning the Mandaic there. And also, we're trying to find help and support to get this ethnic minorities to get that. Took me 6 months to prove to the British Museum in Birmingham Art Gallery, 6 months to prove to them there is a Mandaic in Iraq. And after all this years, since 1991, we are established in UK. Just yesterday, I received email from the health and the faith minister.
Could we conclude the question with all due respect?
So
That we need to be fast.
How we can support your project and engage the society, and we helping there. And that will be great when we see the young people here arriving.
Absolutely.
And that's brilliant. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. No, I mean, there are many of these magic bowls written in Mandaic script. And there are many lead rolls in Mandaic. And so we know that it was a living, thriving language amongst communities in particularly the area around Amara and this area in the period of Koubeba, in fact, in the 6th, 7th centuries AD.
From Ahwaz as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Because
So no,
there's relatives there.
So yeah, it's. I would stress at this period before Islam and into the early period of Islam, there are many different languages and faiths and beliefs living, as it were, and sharing ideas alongside each other. And it's one of, to me, this period of what we call late antiquity is one of the most intellectually fertile periods of the ancient world, because ideas are moving between the Roman world and the Sasanian world and the Sasanian world and the Arab world. And so new technologies, new forms of medicine, and so you are sitting as a community within one of the most important periods of antiquity.
Thanks.
Sorry.
In your perspective, what is the best architectural finding you have ever come across in Iraq?
In my life?
Yeah.
Just introduce yourself.
My name is Al-Qasim Hassan.
So the most important find? It's so difficult. I would say that actually my workmen this year were most surprised when one of them brought a handful of this painted pottery from southeastern Iran that I showed on that picture. Because I had never seen or heard of that type of pottery from Iraq before. It is the first time. And it doesn't look like anything. It's just pottery. But it's pottery that comes from a long way away that no one had ever thought to find in Iraq before. And I think at that moment, that was the most special moment. But the thing about archaeology, and I hope you're going to become an archaeologist and a professor and a museum director or something greater than me, and what you need to know is that every day and every site brings a new discovery. And so if you ask me this question in the museum tomorrow, no, maybe not tomorrow, but Tuesday when I go back to work after the weekend, you'll say, what's the most interesting thing you found in your museum? I will tell you a different answer. Because there's always, it's the great thing about new discoveries. You never know what you're going to find. Thank you.
Sorry, young man took my question, so I had to think of another one on the spot. First of all, my name is Ala Al-Sakban, and I'm a law graduate working at a bank. First of all, thank you very much for being here.
Sure.
Just in the direction of future research, what emerging areas of research in Iraqi archaeology do you find most promising, and how do you foresee that the impact on the field? So what's the association youth? So I was, okay.
Oh, well.
That was very fun.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you very much. That, particularly now, when we hear denial about climate change and global warming from different parts of the world, from different people of different elevated statuses, we should think about how archaeology can tell us about environmental history. And one of the things that we've been doing at Koobyeba is to do flotation recovery of seeds. So we collect bags of dirt, put them into a sieve and with water, and the seeds float to the surface. And by analyzing the seeds and the animal bones, we can see not just what the agriculture is, but what the human-animal-plant interrelationships are. What's successful, what's not. And I can tell you, although the results are still being analyzed, one of the things we already have, and it's the first from Iraq, to my knowledge, is that we have preservation. And so we have pollen samples that can tell us what is in the air, maybe not plane trees, but what's blowing around. And that pollen is trapped in the soil. And that is revolutionary. It's that in the archaeological record. And that is very new. And I think that's going to be a great way forward for archaeologists in the future. To understand the future, we need to understand the past, and the environment is part of that. So thank you.
Hi. Just something related to, sorry.
Hold.
اسمي أحمد مختار. Just about the names. Too many archaeological findings in Nasiriyah, the Ghar, but none of these names keeps on to the like a present time. So both Nasriya and the Ghar are like late names, not really.
No, not ancient names.
I guess Nasriya is like 19th or 18th century, while the Ghar probably is a Yemeni with the Lakhmite who came to Iraq from Yemen. So why we don't have like a research, something from the Sumerian or Akkadian or even Assyrian or whatever ancient civilization in the area?
I think the answer is the passage of history. And as people come and go, languages come and go. And Sumerian gradually gets replaced by Akkadian. It survives as a scholarly language like Latin in some schools in England as late as the Greek period. Then the Greeks come and people start speaking Greek. Then the Arabs come and we start speaking Arabic. And with these layers, of course, knowledge carries on, the genes carry on, continuity of practice, but the change of the language means that place names become known by the latest language. And that's why we don't have Sumerian names on the modern maps, except where archaeologists have excavated them. So I hope that answers that question.
Any other question?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Simpson, for this fruitful information. Actually, I read from a book, yes, which is written by Professor Nail Hannoun, who is the Dean of Archaeology of one college in Iraq. He says the existing antiquities in Iraq nowadays is still 5% of the rest, which is still buried. Are you satisfied with this statement?
I would say that it used to be said when I was studying archaeology, my professor then said that there were 50,000 sites known in Iraq, but only about 100 had ever been excavated. In actual fact, 50,000 is an underestimate by probably a factor of about 4. So there are many, many more sites than will ever be excavated. But every time one is explored, we get new information and new discoveries. The good thing is that, you know, there's a job for life for every single Iraqi student that comes out of the universities, if they have the money. And there will be many changes and new ideas, and everything I may have said today might be changed again in 3 years' time when somebody excavates another site 20 kilometers north of Diwaniyah, for instance. And this is the great thing about archaeology. We keep pushing forward, moving things, and making new discoveries. Thank you.
We'll take only 2 questions.
Wow.
So one question.
Yes, thanks, Doctor, for your...
Omar
Abdillah, thanks, Doctor, for your interesting information. Actually, almost the same question. I have here the same information that's almost 95% of the locations not yet been discovered.
If it is the same question, we will give the opportunity to somebody new.
No.
Unless you have another one.
So is the 95% remaining in the safe places, I mean, or especially you have mentioned climate changes and maybe...
Yes, I mean, all credit to the government of Iraq and the State Board of Antiquities and Heritage in protecting what they can. Iraq is one of the few countries in the world to have a well-equipped, trained archaeological police. I can only think of one other, and that's Italy. And those guys, those police you see in these pictures here, they're not archaeologists, but they know sort of the dates of periods of the pottery they go over. And they're inspecting, and they're listening to reports on the radios, and talking to the sheikhs, and patrolling all the time. That is why there is almost no looting in Iraq now, due to the work particularly of this archaeological police. And my inspectors also, always checking, listening, visiting new construction sites, walking the pipelines. And so the sites are being protected as far as they can be. And when a local landowner tried to build a house within the exclusion zone around Koubaïba, my representative got a court order and a bulldozer, and they smashed that house down because it was being built illegally on land close to the site. I don't think he was very popular locally, but he was enforcing the law. And I think this is a really strong thing. And I think this is almost unique. And I think something to be very, very proud of across Iraq.
Sorry, go on.
First of all, thank you so much for what you've shown us today. It's really insightful, and let's just say it caused some shivers down my spine on some of the certain images. First of all, my name is Robert from Roots and Narrative Podcast. Question for you, because it's just popped into my head.
Before the Persian Gulf was flooded, in, let's say 8,000, 7,000 BC or thereabouts. Before that, the Tigris and the Euphrates were one river between Basra and Oman. We find the evidence of that, but we know that geologically, and we can be sure of it archaeologically. When the Gulf formed, it pushed people up onto the Arabian coast, and it pushed people back into southern Iraq, like a traffic jam. And I think, personally, this is what was a catalyst for probably conflict, but also for water sharing and the building of bigger communities, because they had to settle down and work out how they're going to parcel up this land, which was half the size of what it was before, in the period of, let's say, 6,000, 5,000 BC, the Ubaid period. But underneath the mud of, you saw 1.80 meters, I've only gone down to the 8th century. We need to go down probably 5 meters, 7 meters, 8 meters, down in the plains of southern Iraq. And you will find the prehistoric people there, hunting, fishing, gathering, before villages, before writing. And so, yeah, so the history is deep prehistory. It's the origin of everything, like everywhere. Greatest.
It's not a race. In order to conclude this.
I just want a little tiny question.
You'll never.
History is writing. It's always
yes, that's right.
BC, 4,500, whatever. What's your number?
Yeah, the beginnings of writing is more or less 4,000 BC. 3,500 to 4,000, the Uruk period. First pictographic texts.
Because there's so many estimations.
Yeah, it's about then, and that's what we know at the moment. But pictographic writing is literally picture writing. And so it depends what you think of as the picture. So before they start to write, they are effectively encoding ideas as painted designs on pots. We don't think of that as writing, we call it decoration. But they're still ideas. And I think sometimes we have to think a little bit more widely what we mean when it's the origin of something. And I would say the beginnings of writing obviously lie in prehistory, as the encoding of ideas through design. And I'll leave you with that. It's a slightly controversial idea, but...
we got many questions as soon as we are going to conclude.
It looks like everyone is going to ask a question in this room.
You have my question, but you have got your turn. I'll get just the last two questions, and that's
There's a lady at the back, isn't it?
Okay.
Before, how average the human lived in that time? Do you have any idea?
So, sorry, how
long did they live in
Oh, you mean how long in years did?
No, how long
Life expectancy.
the person lived in that time as average?
Yeah, that's a
300. I think they lived long.
It's a very difficult question to answer, actually, because firstly we need the skeletons, we need the cemeteries, so we need the bones in order to understand this evidence. But after a period of time, I'm not a physical anthropologist, but I've worked with physical anthropologists, and the problem is that according to, when you think about it, you can date the development of the body very tightly when the body is growing. But after we stop growing, when we reach mature adulthood, the body doesn't change all that much in terms of the skeletal record, okay? So it's quite difficult to tell whether this person died at the age of 40 or 60 if we don't know much about the teeth or the conditions. And so I think a lot of times in old reports, people have underestimated, they've been too cautious about estimating the age at death. And this is probably an area where more archaeological science on better preserved ancient populations, using techniques that perhaps we haven't even thought of, might give more evidence. But at the moment at Coopébé, I can't say because I have no human remains.
Thank you so much.
But thank you, it's a good question.
And this is the real last question. No more.
Very much, Dr. Simpson.
Pleasure.
For this interesting and intriguing lecture. And of course, I'll thank Dr. Haider for running such an overflowing lecture theatre. Well, because my question is last question, so I'm going to be very brief, and I wouldn't forget to thank the Iraqi Cultural Center for affording such an opportunity to all of us and inaugurated their activity in London by a lecture like the one you just delivered. Regarding the British Museum, it has been always in the front line of reflecting on Iraqi culture. And since the London Illustration, I think, magazine published the arrival of the Lamas, or the winged book, and then after that the discovery of the deluge and that wave that made all of it. And then it was always giving good things. And then lastly, recently there was a very nice exhibition about the king of Assyria. It was very popular. My question is, are you planning another big event in the British Library or British Museum for Iraqi culture like the one before? Are you planning another?
My colleague Dr. Sebastian Ray, who's working at Gersu, ancient Tello, is hoping to do an exhibition on the Sumerians in a few years' time, inshallah. In the meantime, one of the big priorities of the museum now, under our new director, Nicholas Cullinan, is to redesign and rethink the appearance of all of our galleries. And so now all of the curators, like myself, are engaged heavily in thinking and preparing ideas for the new architect we've appointed to rethink how we do the displays for the next 100 years or more. And so I think we are a museum that were founded in perpetuity. It's a very bold thing to think of, but that's what we were founded to do. And so we have to think now, short term, and very long term. And so keep coming to the museum, keep enjoying. You'll keep seeing changes. We will keep making some improvements and interventions. We're working on that. But yeah, we will always do things with it. Iraq is central to our department.
I'm just reminding you that we need another activity about Iraq, if that's possible.
Okay, well, I guess tonight was one step.
One step forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
at the end of this session, we would like to thank Dr. Simpson, and I would like to invite Dr. Abdul Hamid to offer Dr. Simpson the shield of gratitude for his work in Iraq. And I think
I would like to thank you, Mr. Simpson, about the amazing lecture today, and I'd like to thank you as well, Dr. Haidar. I bring small gift, but with big meaning. Now I invite Ustad Mr. Ala Nasiri and Mr. Muhammad Bikhtiyar from Nasriya, from Arbil, to help me to heavy this
this gift.
This gift. Right.
I will stand.
Go away.
From your way.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much. This is a great honour to be here in the Iraqi Cultural Centre, and I thank you for the invitation. Thank all of you for coming.
We thank you. We thank you.
And may this be, well, this was the second in your series, I believe, so may there be many more lectures and signs of our working together, and you are always welcome in the museum, and I hope that we can talk about other ideas of lectures, talks, visits to the museum, to the galleries, and our museum is your museum, so
There is an open invitation.